Hey there, Transformers. Welcome to Work Transformed, the podcast that tackles the ever-evolving world of product development, project chaos, and everything in between. Each episode, we'll dive into the hottest trends, unpack the latest tools, and chat with inspiring guests who are leading the charge. So, buckle up, get ready to transform your work, and let's do this.
All right, so this is the first episode of our podcast, hopefully first of many, but only time will tell. And you are joined today with Thomas Lenore and Jackie Bittner of the Transformation Catalyst. Say hi, Jackie.
Hello.
So I think today we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to talk through, and we're joined by special guest, Jackie's son, who's home from school today. So, we'll roll with it. I think we're going to keep it simple today. There's no special segments. There's no callers. There's nothing like that. We're just going to talk.
Although we should consider doing callers and just say, I'll say like, first caller, what's your question? Eric, first caller, what's your question? What's that?
Got a piece of paper.
Oh, thank you. This right? Do I get to keep that?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Piece of paper.
So I'm going to call it complete audible because your son being here reminds me of the fact that I often have my children with me and at home, at least when they're not at school, and how anxious I am. I'm like, oh my God, you can see my child in the background. Oh my God, they're talking to me. Oh my God, they're asking for a snack. And I'm always so freaked out, if you will, that people will think I am not a good employee. I am not a good leader. I am not a good insert adjective here because I have my family here, even though I'm working from home where they also live. So if it's okay with you, and this is your time where you really can't veto it, can we talk about how can you work from home and still be your authentic self, still be productive, and balance being a parent, a spouse, a relative of someone who may be living in the home while also being fully present at work? Is that okay, Jay? Tell me.
Oh, yes. Great assessment of the current state. Let's do that audible. I think that audible allows us to even dive into like other situations we may have found ourselves in over the past, 3 to 4 years with, if you weren't a work from home employee, you had to adapt to being a work from home employee. And what does that even look like? So I'm into it. I'm totally into this.
Let's maybe start with just giving a little context. So I can go first. So prior to starting Transformation Catalyst and being a full-time transformation consultant, I worked in the project management space. I was the VP of program management for a company. I had a team. I did a lot of like internal transformation type projects, but I also did a lot of just supporting, goal setting, supporting organizational agility metrics and things like that. And when I, started working from home full time, welcome Mr. Pandemic, I had 2 children. I had a son and a daughter, and in the midst of being home for a pandemic, I had a 3rd child, who is now 6 months old. So I have at any given time 1 to 3 children with me, who are walking, talking, sometimes screaming and yelling. And I often come to this thought of like, is this too much? Like, at what point will people get annoyed with me? And spoiler alert, in the 3 years plus since the pandemic, not once has anyone ever like told me, not a manager, not a colleague, not a trusted friend. No one's ever told me, Thomas, your children are too present. Like, we see too much of them. They're too loud. Like, if anything, I've gotten nothing but grace, yet this still sits in the back of my mind every single day.
I was also going to ask you, is it really a worry of how much other people are bothered by it? Or sometimes it just bothers me? Like, hey, man, I am trying to listen intently on this call, and he's smashing Play-Doh in the background. I love him so very, very much. But I also, like, your mind, it's hard to be in multiple places at once, because it actually isn't in multiple places at once, right? You're either toggling back and forth. But I, too, have been met with that grace that you're talking about. And I think there's reasons for that. We can dive into that in a minute. I'll give a little background on my experience. And actually, I'm not even going to talk about myself. What I am going to talk about, or my background, What I am going to talk about was the decision early on in work from home life to keep my camera on so you could see the chaos happening, right? Like I will always try to give my full attention to the call that I'm in while maintaining safety over here for this little guy. Right now, he's just mad because he wants a piece of paper and he has one. So we'll figure that out in a minute. The reason why the camera on, the welcoming into the life was during the pandemic, he was smaller. He was quite small. He was, I think, 6 months old at the time, 5 months old at the time. And so I had to make a decision rather quickly. Am I going to try to fake it? Like everything is lovely and just chill over here and like be on my meetings? Or am I going to invite you into my actual home? We're all in each other's home. So I got to figure that out. And I chose to be on camera most of the time. With a small child, we would be walking a lot of times from room to room. I often had this view going on of the walking through the house and changing placements. I would turn the camera off if I was doing something, a little more motherly, like changing a dirty diaper or feeding my child. But most of the time the camera was on, and I usually gave a little bit of a housekeeping disclaimer at the beginning of my meetings. Like, hey guys, I know that we're from home and this is new for a lot of us. Welcome to mine. It is chaos. I'm going to ask for a lot of grace and forgiveness, but I'll also extend that to you because I understand, this is a bit challenging at times. And it seems to have worked really well. I actually had a call today with someone. And that's how I kicked it off. Hi, nice to meet you. One quick housekeeping thing. My son was home from school today, just to let you know in case someone comes to interrupt us that is a little tiny 4-year-old that needs some stuff. So
that actually triggered something for me. Like you extending that grace. I don't know that I've ever verbally told anyone why, this child might pop up. Maybe I have, but it's not like a common practice for me. But you giving that grace and extending that information out to your colleague sometimes can like help disarm them. Like sometimes they feel some of that same anxiety or anxiousness that you feel because they have children at home or pets or whatever. I remember one time I was in a town hall. I'll never forget. I was in the town hall and I was leading a section of the town hall and my children kept like tugging my shirt and they were like, daddy, daddy, daddy. And I can only imagine the people could hear that. And I'm just trying to continue to talk through it because I only had 2 slides in the whole town hall. I'm like halfway through the second one. I'm like, if I can just power through this, then I can go on mute and then, we'll be good. And I did power through it. And I think I said at one point, oh, honey, I'll be right with you, just so they didn't think I was ignoring my son.
mm-hmm.
And I got all of these slacks and all these messages afterwards that were like, oh my God, you handled that so well. I would have had a complete meltdown. Oh my God, I would have been so embarrassed you did so well. And I think for them, it was like, it kind of showed them it's okay if your children show up, even in a big, important town hall with hundreds of people. It's okay because life happens. And I don't know. I just thought it was important to point that out because I think sometimes you are so concerned about what's happening in your life, you don't realize that your life is actually helping someone feel better about what's going on in their life. They think they're a hot mess too, and then they're like, oh, but look at this guy, or look at this gal. They're doing a great job. I can do that. Or I am doing that.
I 100% agree with that. I think like being able to say, like to show up that you are also present here or to say like, hang on, let me just address this really quickly. Like it could speak volumes to like even how you are at work maybe. Maybe like you have a person on your team that really needs your help, but you're having a really busy day. They've seen you authentically in real time care and thoughtfully say, hey, not now, maybe later to other people in your life. And that brings like your authentic self back to the workplace as well. So interesting. I am so distracted right now. This is prime topic time. I think he's back to being satisfied.
Yeah, he's doing it. He's doing it all.
I also think that there's value in asking for a moment or asking for a plethora of moments so that you can get things settled where you are. So, for example, I think the way that this meeting started is a great example. I think in retrospect, would have liked to say, hang on, Thomas and everyone listening, I'm going to be back in just a minute, put myself on mute and get him set up at his own little workstation so he can have a focus and then come back to the call versus trying to navigate it. But yeah, I think there's value in just calling out like, hey, I need a moment, because then the people that you're on the call with also get an expectation set, like, okay, I'm going to be out of pocket for just a minute here. You see what's happening, but I'm going to be back. And I think if you do it over and over, you start to prove like, yeah, I will be back. And yeah, this will be handled. And look, today is the day I need to ask for grace, and I'll see you in 2 hours or whatever that is.
Even for those folks who aren't battling with their children at home, sometimes that moment is super valuable. So you may need to step away for a moment, but that gives them that moment to go to the bathroom they have not had all day, because we live in this back-to-back meeting culture. That gives them the moment to like refill their coffee that they've been trying to like refill for the last 2.5 hours, and they just haven't been able to get up. And so, and I keep bringing this back to me because I am self-conscious of all these things. I do them, but it's always like, oh my God, now, what are they going to think of me now? What are they saying about my comment about this? How are they feeling that my son or daughter is here? But in reality, sometimes you taking a break gives them that break they didn't.
And that breathing room too. Yeah.
Like I've had people even like text me in my personal life, and I'm like, oh, I'd love to read that because it seems like they need me urgently, but like I can't. And just having a 30-second break to like respond to a text message is invaluable. And so it's just a reminder to ourselves, like sometimes we overthink things that are super complicated. I mean, it's super simple. We make something so complicated that it's actually in reality very simple. You need a moment, ask for a moment, take the moment. Instead, we're like, well, how can we multitask? How can we juggle? In reality,
right? How do we multitask? That's what we do. How do we multitask? We don't. Watch this. Can I please have a moment, sir? I'm going to go on mute and figure out what this picture dilemma is all about, and I'll be right back.
Well, while you figure that out, the other thing that I think this helps segue us into, which was not a planned part of this segment, was talking about the myth of multitasking. We just talked about, the knee-jerk reactions to say, oh man, I can both respond to my child and listen to this meeting, and in some cases, and slack someone up. I can do all three at once. What scientists have kind of proved is that is not actually true. You run into this dilemma called context switching, meaning when I'm in this meeting, I'm in a context focused on being able to articulate, explain, problem solve, whatever the meeting is about. We're in a staff meeting, we're trying to talk about, what productivity metrics like for the month. I am focused on the context of what is productivity metrics. My child is asking for a snack. That is a completely different context. Biologically, your brain has to therefore reset itself and say, oh, now I'm responding to something about something totally different. Let me get into that context. And then someone's slacking us about our expense report that we haven't submitted. Your brain does what? Once again, switches context. And so, whereas we call that multitasking, in reality, your brain's only doing one task at a time. It's like, oh, let me figure this out. Oh, let me figure that out. And so you're actually doing yourself a disservice by saying, let me try to do all of this at once versus trying to take a breath, step back, and finish the most urgent thing at once.
You just sparked this comparison. Multitasking has the same negative impacts as too much work in progress, right? We always think like we want to put all these tasks in progress. Look at all the progress we're making. We're making so much progress. But there have been so many studies done that the more tasks you put in flight, the slower you go and the less you get done. And I think that's the same parallel with this context switching or multitasking. You're doing all of these things and you're going to get a few of them done, but a lot of them are going to remain open at the end of the day, or you're not going to give whatever it is your full attention. You're going to send that email and then you go, oh my gosh, there's 50 typos in there. Why didn't I take my time? Or whatever it is. Also, I have a cat here. How you guys feeling? How you guys doing?
You got a full house over there. For once, I'm an empty nester and you got a full house. Look at how the tables have turned.
I was just thinking, I don't know what's happening right now, but it's happening.
So
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was gonna bring it back a little bit to just that feeling of, oh my gosh, what are people going to say, or how are they going to react to some of these things? And that is like, I know that before I became a parent, I had a different tolerance level, and I think about my audience. I think about my audience in the different places that they may be in life, especially if it's colleagues that I know and people that I have some background on. I will position my messaging slightly different depending on who I'm speaking with. So like, for example, if I'm speaking with colleagues who may not have children or other distractions at home. I will say something like, I know this can be a little disruptive. Here's what I'm going to do in the event that I need to turn my attention away. And right, again, it's with that expectation setting. And I probably overly apologize and I need to stop apologizing, but I'll do a little upfront, like, so I'm sorry if it's a little clunky today, like, depending on what that session is. If it's another parent, those usually go so well. We're just like, hey, you guys have a certain look in your eyes and you're like, I got you, you're good. And
Oh
I
my
think
God. Like,
that
when a parent apologizes to me on a call, I'm like, please don't. Please don't ever apologize. Like, what? If you need 17 quick breaks, we will take 17 quick breaks because I know what it's like to be in that experience. So you're right. Like, a parent to parent contact is so much different than like having a conversation with someone who's younger and just doesn't have a family yet.
And I'm going to just go on a leap here and say, like, some of this working from home with parents and being a parent and just with people that may never have worked from home before, like, there's a lot of opportunity in all of this to gain your experience with providing empathy. You're right, and being an empathetic person, like strengthening your emotional intelligence and learning how to calm yourself down if you're triggered by someone like getting constantly distracted, and things like that.
That's an interesting point because I think when we were in an office setting, and I'll speak for myself only, I won't generalize this, but when I was in an office setting, it was far easier for me to empathize with people because I saw them. I could tell when they were having a bad day because, like, you physically saw the person. You're like, "Oh, they're walking real slowly, and that's not their usual pace. They're not engaging in conversations around the water cooler like they usually do. Like, something must be off." When you're at your house, sitting around the computer screen, only engaging with people when you're in an immediate meeting with them, you have no idea what's going on in their world. They could have just experienced a traumatic loss. They could have just had, they could have just won the lottery. I mean, I don't want to say all bad things. Like, they could have just won the lottery and they could be on cloud nine, and you have no idea. And then you get in the meeting, they have a short fuse because, life is happening in the background. You are like, wow, they hate me. Wow, I must be doing horrible. Or you start to come to these conclusions in your mind and you can't empathize with them. You can't say, oh, I understand why they feel like that. I understand why they were frustrated. I understand why they lashed out, even though it wasn't appropriate. Like, you don't have anything.
Right.
It's like, I think when we've transitioned to work from home, we've lost the ability to really be humans with our colleagues, and we've become these like robots to a certain extent. Because even in the office, you were standing around the water cooler, like just having casual conversation. So I got to know you. I got to understand like your family dynamics. I got to learn that you liked, frisbee, and you did frisbee competitions. Like, for the most part, now in this virtual world, unless you're someone like me who just randomly slacks people and have some random questions that have nothing to do with work, which is dicey. Some people like that, some people don't. Unless you're like that, you have now lost this like human connection with a lot of your colleagues, and you know them very well for like what their subject matter expertise is. You know them very well for how they can help you in a business world, and you have no connection to them outside of that.
I am not going to discount or discredit the in-person element of connection, right? When your physical energies are next to each other, like, there's some magical things that can happen. So I know that that's not present in the virtual world, but I'm going to take a little spin on it a little differently.
Okay.
I've actually fared very, very, very well in the virtual world in terms of connections with folks. And I don't know what that's about. I couldn't tell you scientifically why. It might be because, shameless plug, I got no secrets, just stories to share. Like, I find these opportunities to do things like that. And in my last professional corporate job, I made a lot of connections with people that I do not live near by any sense of the means. And I'm still like in contact with today. And a lot of that was being able to make these connections virtually, whether it's, having like that coffee cooler time set aside to chat or participating in like work events where you could actually travel to. Like, that was a pretty big one. But there's also like something about being on camera and just being open and outgoing, right? And not everybody is that. A lot of people are very comfortable off camera, and I get that. And like, I will never force anyone to be on a camera. I'll strongly encourage it. And when you feel comfortable enough to give it a try, and I've had people actually get there and try and then like it. So I used to have an employee that would only come on camera during our team meetings. And I think it has to do with like an environment that we set up. There was like a lot of psychological safety in that space. But when there was like other forums happening, they would not turn their camera on, and that was fine. They never got dinged for it. They never had it written up on a review or anything like that, right? And I think it's separating those like personality preferences in the virtual world from being judged on them. That needs to like be clear, like in whatever org you are in. Otherwise, yes, you're not gonna, like, to your point, it's harder to make those kind of connections and read those body languages that maybe you didn't read before. Something you had mentioned, just pivoting slightly, was just about how that person might be fired up because of something that happened outside of work. Most times, and this is just a gut feeling, I think most times people's behaviors in meetings is not a personal thing. Like most times. Sure, you could have some conflict with certain folks and maybe there's a little personal like things going on there. But I think in most times it's something else and it's something deeper. And it's almost like that behavior is communicating. And this is like what we talk about with children. There's a need there that they feel either not heard, maybe they're yelling because they think that their point's not being made, or some sort of attention needs to be given that can de-escalate. But then we also don't like to give too much attention to people that are constantly detractors. But that's a whole other topic for another day. I feel like I am all over the place today.
Well, you're dropping good nuggets. It brings me back to the question I had a few minutes ago that I didn't ask. Are there do's and don'ts that you think that it should do or should exist in terms of working from home? And make it broad. Like, they don't have to be for folks who are juggling family and home life. Like, I think even for folks who are single as can be and live alone, like, I think there are some do's and don'ts that exist. And I'll maybe kick us off. Like, one of them is, I think it's very important, especially now that a lot of folks work from home primarily, to create very clear work-life balances. For some people, it's a physical kind of barrier. It's like, this is my workspace and this is my home. Everything else is my home space. I don't bring work into the home and I don't bring home into the workspace. And that way, when you walk away from that desk, from that, office that you created in your home, you can turn that part of your brain off. You can be fully present in your personal life. But for some people, it's not as black and white. Like, for me, it's not a physical barrier. Like, my office is my basement, but I also do non-work things in my basement because I just like the space. For me, it's like, this is my boundary. Like, these are the time parameters I give work and the time parameters I give my family. This is how I know when I am burnt out and I need to step back. Here are activities that I will do and I kind of keep sacred for myself on a daily or a weekly basis to continue to recharge myself. So it's like knowing what those boundaries are for you and then holding yourself accountable for like upholding them. Because so often we set boundaries and then we don't adhere to them, and then we see work bleeding over into our personal life, and now we're stressed out all the time. So like, for me, one of the biggest do's is like, set very realistic and clear boundaries for yourself and continue to reassess, like, am I doing these things and are they working?
Oh man, great number one rule. There are a couple of things I want to just like piggyback on is like, those boundaries don't have to be like standards that everybody adheres to. They're like personal to you. And two things. Thing one, know what they are or try them out, like experiment with them if you're not sure what they are, right? Like I personally like to do a little jog around my neighborhood. I'm not a runner, but it is that thing that helps me recenter and ground myself. And I also have a hard time being accountable to it because if it's too cold, I'm not doing it. Or if I'm super busy, I'll do it later, or something like that. So I even have like close friends that I'll say, I'm going to run today. And if I don't tell you that I did it, feel free to push me on it. And every time they do. And it feels good though. I'm like, you're right. And then I go and I do the thing. You don't have to feel solely responsible for the accountability. You can find your people that help you drive your own accountability too. So like that's one. When you said that, I don't know why I haven't thought of this sooner. We were talking about these different boundaries now that we work from home, in terms of being connected all of the time. I don't know if you remember when it started to become like popular to have your work email on your phone, or when like businesses started doing that, that was also like an always on situation. And I feel like we still haven't maybe addressed that. And like when we started doing work from home, it just became even more exacerbated, right? And so I mean, I did work at a job that I would reply if somebody pinged me, no matter what time of day it was. And then it was like total recipe for burnout, because I worked for a global company. So of course people are pinging me at all hours of the day. Like it was just not sustainable. So I think like knowing that that exists can also help you in your home environment to be like, all right, work has to be done for the day. My brain needs a break. My brain just needs a different set of things to worry about.
I'll tell you a little secret about me.
Oh, yeah.
I, at one point in my career, it was not a recent point, it was pre-pandemic, I decided that my phone was for me. And so I took my work email off my computer. Now, there were a few times where that was actually inconvenient.
Yeah.
Because I did need it, but the inconvenient moments were far fewer than like the times where like it was convenient not having it. And I chose that would keep my mental well-being. Like if I wasn't by my computer, that means I obviously probably wasn't working, and therefore I didn't need my. I did keep my calendar on there, and that was a conscious choice for me, because it was like I want to be able to check my schedule when I go to bed and make sure I know exactly what time my first meeting is. I want to make sure that I understood, what my day looked like, and so like that was not I viewed that as a tool that I was utilizing for my mental health versus the tool the company was using to like get to me. But I think you're right. You got to make those kind of decisions for yourself.
So that is very detailed. Rule number 1 for working from home: set boundaries. What's rule number 2? I guess I should come up with what I think a good practice is for rule number 2. I guess rule number 2 and rule number 1 are very similar, because it is the take that step away and take a brain break. And I'm going to give an example of like an actual in-office job that I implemented that at long ago, and it kind of like still works today-ish. So at my very first job, corporate job, not first job ever, the building was in the middle of nowhere. Like it was literally like the middle of a field. But being on a computer all day, like I could tell it was hurting my eyes. So I would get up every hour and a half-ish, and I'd walk to the window and I'd stare out into the big open space, and I would try to find like the farthest tree that I could find, just like give my eyes some exercise back into like long distance viewing. And my boss at the time noticed me doing this, and I was a little nervous, like, oh, he's gonna think I'm just slacking off and walking around the building all the time. But he observed me, and he noticed what I was doing, because I would have to walk by his desk every time to get there. And he just like asked me one day out of curiosity, like, you giving your eyes a break? And I was like, oh yeah. It's like, they get really strained. And I was like staring at this tree the one day, and did you know that this road has been busted for a very long time? And just like kicked off some conversation. And getting that support that early on in my career to do that, I think it's kind of helped like solidify that. But I also know that there are days when those meetings are back to back. It almost feels like scary to say I need a minute, right? Like, oh, they're going to think I'm a slacker, or they're going to think I don't care about this project, but that's not true at all. So implementing that even with your family, taking 5-minute breaks could be something that's helpful. Oh,
I think we've covered a lot of ground today. And I think the overall consensus is probably... Oh, go ahead. You want to give us the overall consensus? Go for it.
No, before we do overall consensus, there was one thing I wasn't sure how to squeeze it in, and I know we're running out of time.
Squeeze it in.
So working from home for me, when that started to be a thing everybody did all of the time, became a huge like support for my mental health and identity as I became a new mom. Let me tell you a little bit about that. Like I'm a people person. I will love to see you in person and tell you mom jokes all day and sit in a room and collaborate in person all day. Like I love that kind of stuff. But at this juncture in my life, when the pandemic hit, I was a new mom and I felt like I was failing all the time. I was at work in a new position and I felt like I was failing all the time. And then being able to work from home opened up this opportunity for me to feel like I was doing good at both. Like I felt like I could give the energy I wanted to give to work without having that additional like travel time and being away from my child if he was sick or anything like that. And it also gave me that opportunity to be there and hold him maybe while I do a meeting or put him down for a nap, or even just like when I took my break for the day or my lunch, I could go for a walk outside with my child. So it was something that actually helped me out very, very well mentally during a time where a lot of people were in a very dark place because, you know, the world was just flipped upside down and mine got flipped twice. And so I think that's important to remember. I know there's a lot of pushes to go back into the office, and I totally get that. But I think that there are things that have benefited people that aren't going as heard. And I think that's one of them. For me, that was a big one of them for like advocating. I would love the option to work from home.
All right, so you have shared that, and thank you for sharing that, because I think so many people are uncomfortable to acknowledge some of the feelings that they might have around like their own performance. And it's not about like how you perform against your job description, so how you feel like you perform against your own set of expectations for yourself. And I think that's really real. Well, you sparked a different thing for me, so I'm gonna pivot. Instead of closing with a recap, I think people have listened. They have taken away what they want to take away, so I won't tell them what the most important points were. I'd love to hear your thought and my thought on this. What is one thing that a manager of human beings should know or be thinking about or consider or do as they work with a group of people who are mostly distributed all around the country nowadays, mostly working from home, may have never met each other in person or have met each other really sparingly? Like, what is one thing that they should think about, know, or do? Let me know if you want to go first or if I should.
If you have, well, here's the thing. I'll go first. I think as a manager managing a global sort of team, the thing that you should always keep in mind, because it's not only the remote world, it's like a cultural world. Like, you have to come to your meetings from a neutral, factual place. If you're trying to like come in and start to learn what's going on, I would come in with no assumptions about how people are feeling. Because once you start to do that, you start to create a story about them that may not be correct. And I think that if it is going to be a virtual setting, it's super important to take that time to do those one-on-ones with at least your immediate team, to really get a sense for like who they are as people and who they are as people at work, right? And there's like different tactics and coaching techniques and things that you could do, powerful questions you could ask. But I think that's the key thing is, one, don't make assumptions, and two, do your best to find out who these people are behind the camera, right? And then you'll be able to start to tether it to what the work is that they're doing, what the opportunities are that they want, and then you build that trust and rapport. And then you have that thing where you don't feel virtual. I have someone who I've only been friends with virtually, and I swear to you, she's like one of my best friends, and I can't believe we haven't ever met, like, so I think if you give it that time and that space, you'll do great things.
Mine is almost overly simple. It's this notion that small talk isn't a waste of time. Anyone who has ever worked with me in any capacity knows that every meeting is going to start with at least 3 to 5 minutes of small talk. There is going to be just random topics, and we're going to get into the business at hand at some point in the meeting, but we're going to start off talking about whatever is top of mind for folks, because it helps to unpack the baggage that they might be bringing from the rest of the day. They are exhausted, they're frustrated, they're confused about things. It's like, let's just take a mental reset here. Let's come into this conversation with something fun, something off the beaten path. Let's put work to the side for a moment. And it also gives you this opportunity that so rarely exists without you forcing it, to get to know people, because people are going to talk about a movie they want to go see, or this TV show they're being watching, or what they did this weekend or are going to do next weekend, or like something interesting, fun, unexpected. And you'd be surprised how many times the topic is just like so wildly off the beaten path that you would have never expected this person to be interested in this thing or have done this thing, and that they're just like, yeah, I just went bungee jumping this weekend. You're like, what? You really think like the quad game, like you went bungee jumping, and it's like, yeah, I did, no big deal. And so like, as a manager, encourage people to have that small talk. I know it often feels like, oh my God, we're wasting time. Like we need to just hop right in. But it's this mentality of like, let's just hop right in. That, in my opinion only, is making people feel less like humans and more like resources. A computer, you don't have a small talk with a computer. You just tell it, do this. Go to www.google.com. Go to this website. Do this word processing. You don't have small talk with a computer. But with a human, you do, I think.
You do. Yeah, I agree. Especially if it's your team and you are the owner of that meeting and that forum, let that small talk happen. There's so much valuable learning, little nuggets that you'll get that you can just use to be more connected with your team. You don't even have to use it for any business related thing, just to know that person as a person, because that's what makes people feel good. Side note, I ask my AIs how they're doing every day. It's just a funny game I do.
Well, with that, I think we're at time. This has been fun. I hope it's been fun for everybody else. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Thomas. And thank you, everyone, for your kindness and patience as I navigated the work from home with a child like today.